Welcome to the Justin Strawn podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you recording for another week. Sorry to say that I had to take off last week from recording. My wife was home because of all the snow and ice and stuff that we got. I don't like to record in the mornings when she's here because we like to spend some time together. So that is why I was unable to record last week. But I'm glad to be back with you guys and recording again on an early Tuesday morning. We had a lot to talk about. Obviously, if you're a Mississippi State fan, basketball team has not done great. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the baseball team and possibly some preseason expectations and some possible overs and unders that I sent to Brian and Robbie on the rumblings this morning. And also I will be doing some discussions about a couple of TV shows that I've been watching and some TV news that has been released here recently. If you haven't liked, subscribed, and all those things on all of the social media platforms, I would really appreciate it if you did. I am on Twitter. I'm broadcasting this live on Twitter this morning. I'm not normally on Twitter. I'm normally on TikTok, but for whatever reason, TikTok was not cooperating with me, so we are on Twitter this morning. If you are watching on Twitter, appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're not, and you're just catching this on the podcast catchers of your choice, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe, like, and do all that stuff there, especially on Apple and Spotify, because that's where most of my downloads come from. Like I said, if you're on Apple, just drop a 5-star review there and put a review, love the show, something like that. Doesn't have to be long. Just a quick sentence would help me out a whole lot. So let's go ahead and get into it. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get into a discussion about Mississippi State basketball. The Bulldogs have not had the most rousing success here recently. Mississippi State did actually end up beating LSU pretty convincingly last week on the road. That was a really good win for the Bulldogs. They just absolutely took it to the Tigers. Was that one? I think it was on the road. Yeah, it was on the road. But they beat the Tigers pretty convincingly. So LSU's not good. So I was like, okay, that's great. I'm glad that you beat them. But they go to Missouri this past weekend. They had plenty of opportunities to win that game, but they just could not put it together they just couldn't really put it all together at the end and pull that victory out, which is a little frustrating because, like I said, that was a game that you could have won. And honestly, what I would like to see for this Mississippi State team just going forward is, can they beat these teams in the bottom half of, because that's what they are. They're 3-6. They're right down there at the bottom of the SEC standings with a lot of other teams. Can they beat the Texases of the world? Can they beat Ole Miss, which they've already lost to Ole Miss once? Can they beat Oklahoma? They've already beaten Oklahoma, Texas. Can they beat South Carolina? They play them once, I think, later on this week. I'm not sure when they play them. No, they don't play during the midweek this week. They've got Arkansas this weekend. But, can they beat some of these teams that are at the bottom half of the standings? And Missouri is very much one of those right on the bubble, good but not great teams. It's a game that you would have liked to have been able to pull out. It would have been a nice little. It would have been nice to have 2 straight wins going to this game against Arkansas, because John Calipari, even though he doesn't have them playing at the way that a Calipari team normally is, Calipari teams are normally top 10, top 5 ranked teams competing for the number 1, number 2 seed in whatever regional that they're going to be placed in. That's not what this Arkansas team is. They're probably a 3, 4, or 5 seed at this point. And it would have been nice to have had that going into that game, but they can't pull it off. And look, I don't expect them to beat Arkansas this weekend. I really just don't see that happening. The thing that you're kind of looking for is, like I said, if you can beat some of these other teams that are in the bottom half of the SEC standings right there along with you, you can at least say that maybe Coach Jans can get this thing turned around next year. That's kind of basically what we're hoping for Mississippi State basketball, because let's just be perfectly honest with you. This fan base is more than willing to tap out on basketball. And it drives me crazy, the fact that so many Mississippi State fans just don't care about basketball, because it is my favorite part of Mississippi State sports. I love it more than any other part of Mississippi State athletics. I don't know if I've said it on this podcast or if I've said it on others in the past, but I grew up right smack dab in the middle of the 90s. And in 1995, 1996, I was a sophomore and junior in high school those 2 years. And those two teams were having the most success. Obviously, the baseball team was still doing really, really well. But back then, you couldn't watch every single baseball game that you wanted to watch. That just wasn't a thing that you could do. I love those 95, 96 teams. That 96 team, obviously, that went to the Final Four. Eric Dampier, Dante Jones, Darrell Wilson. Those guys were just absolutely phenomenal. And as a result, I love Mississippi State basketball. And like I said, it just drives me crazy. It's the first sign of, things not going well. State fans will tap out on basketball. Look, I'm not going to blame anybody for doing that. Don't get me wrong. You do what you want to do and you do what you enjoy. If Mississippi State basketball only brings you happiness when they're good, I completely get that. You don't want to have anything to do with it when they're not. Yeah, I get that. But like I said, it's just really hard to build a consistent winning program when the fan base doesn't support it like they would at some of these other schools. Because like I said, if it's one of the reasons why Chris Jans is probably really trying to find another job these past few years, is because he knew that the support for it just wouldn't be there if things got rough at times, and things are kind of rough right now. So, look, I just want Chris Jans to do well enough to turn this thing around in next year. I need him to keep some of these players on board. We don't need to have the same situation that we had this season, where you're having to just replace almost every single player on the roster with a new set of transfers. That's just the one thing that you can't really afford in this particular day and age. Like I said, I'm hoping that he can turn this thing around. I'm hoping that he'll figure it out and get this ship righted going into the 2026-2027 season. We'll have to wait and see. So, on the women's side, they're very up and down. There are times when they look really good, and there are times when they don't look so great at all. They go on the road last week, and they end up beating Tennessee on the road, top 25 ranked Tennessee Lady Volunteers, and they beat them pretty convincingly. I mean, point victory that they had. I mean, they were in control pretty much from start to finish. But just kind of what is a common theme in Purcell era of Mississippi State basketball, they have a really big win and they go out and they can't pull off another win against a team that they should beat. And Missouri is a good team, just kind of like their men's team. They're a good team, but they're not a great team. That's a team that if you're playing them at home, which they were, you need to win that game. If you want to get back to that point, if that's what you're trying to build back towards, you have to follow up some of these big wins with a win over, a good, not great team, which is what Missouri is. And they have a lead late in the game, but they end up giving a 10-0 run at the end of the game, and Missouri ends up pulling out the victory. Like I said, that's just kind of been the case every single season for Sam Purcell and the Bulldogs. I mean, they get some good wins, but they can't sustain anything to really get positive momentum. Look, they're probably going to make the NCAA tournament. Last time I checked, in most bracketologist predictions for the Bulldogs, they are right around an 8-9 seed, somewhere in that general vicinity, which is good, but you're not making it past the first weekend in all likelihood, because if you are in that 8-9 seed range, that means you're playing a number one seed. And the women's game, the number one seed doesn't lose that often until the second weekend. It does happen some, but it's just not a common thing that happens in women's basketball. It does happen, but just not very often. So, like I said, I'm hoping that they can pull some things together. I don't expect it to happen in their next game. Thursday night, they play South Carolina. I think it's at South Carolina. And they're the number 3 ranked team in the country. I just don't expect the Bulldogs to win that game. So, we'll see. Anyway, let's talk a little baseball. Like I said, baseball team. I'm going to do some over and unders on baseball team, and I sent these into Brian and Robbie this morning for their rumblings, and I'll just give you my thoughts on what the results of these are going to be. So here's what I sent them this morning. I'm giving them some over unders for the baseball team this year. And I started off with home runs hit. Last season, they hit 103, which I think was a school record. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I think the 103 home runs that they hit last year was a school record. And I put 103 on there because this team is supposed to be better offensively than they were last year. They are supposed to have more pop in their lineup than they did last year, because anybody you talk to who covers college baseball for a living, whether it's the D1 baseball people, the Baseball America people, whoever it may be, they all say that Mississippi State has a loaded lineup. And if you look up and down, you got some of the best production from last year's team returning, obviously with Ace Reese at the top of that. But you also got some great transfers from Virginia. You got some transfers from some other places as well. So you would think that you should be able to do more. So I will say more. I will say over on this one, even though 103. It's like I said, if I'm not mistaken, which was a school record last year, that's asking a lot to hit more home runs than you did when you set a school record in 2025. D1 baseball first team All Americans. I sent them 1.5. Can they get more than 1.5 D1 baseball All Americans? My thinking is that Ace Reese will be one of those. I think he'll end up being a first team All American by most people's accounts. And the question is, can you get one more? The only thing that's really holding me back is because I don't know from a pitching perspective if there is enough depth there. There's plenty of depth on this pitching staff. There is, but it's not as deep as the lineup is. And so that makes me wonder, if somebody does get hurt, will there be enough people to step in? I don't know. So I'm looking at the pitchers. I'm not sure there. The only thing that I'm holding myself back on the lineup part is there's going to be so many guys who are going to be competing for a starting position, and they've got so many guys who can play and that they could put in as a starter. I wonder if there's going to be another guy in the lineup who can get enough at bats and enough plate appearances to put up the numbers required to get a second first team All American. That's my really only thing that's holding me back. I don't think this team has the lack of talent. I think if you look just by talent, I think they've got the talent for more than 1.5 first team All Americans. So, but I just don't know. Like I said, there's so much talent, and there's going to be so much competition within this team to get playing time, to be on the field. I just wonder if there's going to be too much rotation, too many platooning and stuff like that for another guy to do it. So I'm going to say under on that. I'm going to think Ace Reese is probably the only one. First team All SEC, I said 2.5. I'll go over there. I think you got a chance to have some really special guys on this team, and I'll be very interested to see what this team does in terms of in the SEC play. They might have the most difficult SEC schedule, and like I said, I haven't looked at the other teams and who they're playing, but I know their schedule is just absolutely brutal. I talked about that before. Regular season wins, I said 40. I think that's probably about where they finish. So I'm going to say over, but if it is over, it's going to be just slightly over. SEC wins, I said 19. I think this team is in the 18 to 20, 17 to 20 range for SEC wins. I want to say under. I think probably just as difficult as the schedule is, I'm thinking 17 or 18 wins in SEC play is probably where this team ends up. That's a really good. If you end up with 40 wins and 17, let's say you win 17, you have 17 and 13 in SEC play. With the teams that they are playing, assuming that everybody's pretty close to where they were at the beginning of where all the preseason polls are putting people, if you end up winning 17 games in SEC play, you're a number 1 seed, you're hosting, and you're probably in talks to be a top 8 seed as well. Could they easily win more? Yes. Could this team win 19, 20, 21 games in SEC play? Absolutely. But they do have a difficult schedule, and it's going to be difficult to pull off that many wins. So I'm going to say, like I said, I'm thinking 18 is about where they are, 18 or 19. But we'll go under just for now. We'll say, like I said, just because I'm going under, I'm not thinking they're going to go late. Let's see. Next thing I said was SEC tournament wins 3.5. If they go over, they're winning the SEC tournament. The way the tournament works now is basically you got to win 4 games to get there. It's single elimination. I want to say under. But when Chris Lamonis was here, he didn't really play to win the SEC tournament. He wasn't trying to lose the SEC tournament, but he wasn't really playing to win it either. So I'm going to say under. I think they'll win one or two games. Maybe they win three and get to the championship. Maybe they win it. I don't know, but I'm going to say under just to be safe here. Postseason wins, NCAA tournament wins. I said 8.5. Here's the way. Basically, what I'm saying here is, if they go over, they're getting to the College World Series Championship Series. If they go under, they're not, because you got to get at least 3 wins that first round, possibly 4 if you lose one of the first 2 games. You got to get 2 wins in a Super Regional. Then the same thing in the College World Series. You got to get at least 3 to get to the championship series, possibly 4 if you lose one of the first 2 games. So I'm thinking, I'll say over. I say they get to the College World Series championship. That's a pretty big prediction, but I think they can do it. I think this team has the talent. I think Coach O'Connor is got what it takes to get this team to the College World Series and for them to possibly win the thing. I think that is very much something that is in the cards. Now, weird things happen in baseball all the time. You get a pitcher that's pitching really well. You get a hitter that's just can't miss the ball every time that he's up at the plate, and you get sent home. A number 4 seed overall gets sent home in a Super Regional. That stuff happens all the time. But if we're just going by talent and what this team is capable of, I think this team is very much capable of getting to the College World Series, getting to that championship series, and winning it all. Will they do it? Who knows? But we'll see. All right, let's keep going, guys. Let's take a break from the Mississippi State side of things. Let's talk about a few shows I've been watching. Fallout. So you've seen the first 7 episodes of Fallout. I think the final episode of season 2 will air either tonight or tomorrow night. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've been really pleased with this season. I think it's very bold, very ambitious this season has been. I think they are trying to do quite a bit, and sometimes it's been to its detriment. I don't know that this season is quite as good as it was last season, but one of the things that people have struggled with for the second season of Fallout is just the many plot lines that they have going and the many stories that were trying to tell at one time. And I think people were struggling to keep them all tied together. They're doing a really good job, at least in episode 7. We'll see what they do in episode 8 of pulling all of these storylines together, finally paying off. All right, we've had all these different storylines going. You had, the Ghoul going one way. We've had Lucy going one way. We've had Aaron Mote's character, I can never remember his name, doing his own thing. And they're starting to pull them all together here at the end of the season. Like I said, episode 7 was a really good episode. There have been some really good bangers. I thought episode 5, if I remember correctly, was really good as well. So this has been a really fun series. If you haven't checked out Fallout, it's on Amazon Prime or Prime Video. That's the way they prefer it to be called for their streaming service. But it's on Prime Video. The first season was phenomenal. The second season is really good. Like I said, I'm not sure that I would say season 2 is as good as season 1, but it's still pretty good. And I'm very excited to see what they do in the finale. Like I said, they've had a couple of real bangers here in this season, and I think this season is tracking to be another really good one as well. Some other things that I've watched. I want to talk about Percy Jackson and the Olympians. It's the second season. This was on Disney Plus. I told Ryan this when the first season aired a couple of years ago. Is this show, I'm not really talking about the show itself. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Maybe you haven't even seen it because you think it's just for kids. That's fine. But to me, this is the type of show that Disney Plus should have been putting on their streaming service left and right. This is the type of show that just would have been in their wheelhouse because it's perfect for what they call the all 4 quadrants. Young people, older people, boys, girls, men, women. This is the type of show that you could have watched with your family. It's got teenagers as the protagonist, as the main characters in this thing. So you're going to get kids who want to watch it, younger kids, teenagers, that they would be interested in it. You get the adults who read the books when they were kids. You get the parents who are watching it along with their kids, and the action stuff. It's not spectacular, but it's good enough that it keeps your attention. If you're not a child and you're watching this just for the action scenes, it's fairly dark at times. I mean, with these teenage children fighting each other and fighting potentially to the death. So, like I said, there's enough stuff in there for a lot of people to enjoy and watch this show. And like I said, I'm just really I'm just really confused why Disney Plus just didn't fill up its streaming service with shows like this, because it would have been really, really successful, and it would have been the exact type of thing that would have done really well for their streaming service and get it off to just an absolutely amazing start. But for whatever reason, Disney Plus just hasn't been able to. I mean, the reason most people keep Disney Plus on right now are people like me who just want to turn on a Marvel movie every so often, want to turn on a Star Wars movie every so often. And that's the reason why I keep Disney Plus on hand, is because those are some of my favorite things, and those are the things I want to watch occasionally. Whenever I feel like it, I turn it on, and it's there. But they could have done a lot more with this, and maybe they'll eventually learn to get some of this stuff. And I understand. Look, Percy Jackson, it takes quite a bit of money to pull that show off, so I can kind of understand why you don't just have a ton of it out there. But you don't have to have things that are as high budget as that is. You can do things that are a little bit lower budget, and like I said, just absolutely clean up in terms of streaming viewership, because you would attract so many different parts of the demographics out there, and you could get families watching your streaming service all the time, and they just, for whatever reason, they haven't done it. It's a good show. It's not great. The issue with Percy Jackson is it's led by teenagers, people who are like 15, 16 years old, and acting. The actors are good most of the time, but they're not great. Uh, Walker Scoble, I think that's the kid's name. He's fantastic. He is going to absolutely be a star as long as he doesn't go down the way of most child actors. If he can parlay what he did with that movie that was on Netflix, I can't remember, the Adam Project or something like that, he parlayed that into this television show. And if he can go from taking this television show and turn it into something even bigger, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. The kid's got a lot of moxie, and he's got a lot of charisma, and he has the potential to be just an absolute star. Like I said, assuming that he doesn't go down the way a lot of other child actors do. One more show, and then we're going to talk about some news. Wonder Man. It's the newest MCU television show. Speaking of Disney Plus, this one's really good. The MCU has not really been able to figure out what it wants to do in terms of streaming television. It has really struggled with figuring out how to best put this out there, because what they did in 2021 and those first couple of years when they put out shows, they basically filmed movies and then just broke it up into like 45-minute segments is what they did. And well, I enjoyed them, and I think those first four shows were really, really good. You had WandaVision, you had Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I'm sorry, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You had uh, Loki, the first season of Loki, and you had Hawkeye, which was set during Christmas and was kind of a bit of a Christmas special. I thought those were all really good, but it really dropped off in quality after that. But one of the things that helped Wonder Man is this was filmed to be a TV show, and it feels like a TV show, unlike a lot of the Marvel projects that we've had prior to this. This one was very much for television, and you could feel that in the way that they filmed it, and the way that they produced it, and the way that they brought it to our screens. Really solid show. Like I said, it's 8 episodes, all are about 30 minutes long. And what makes this show just really, really good, I mean, Yahya Abdul-Mateen and Ben Kingsley are just fantastic together. It's not necessarily a pairing that I would have thought would have just been, phenomenal coming into it, but they are. They are just really, really good together, and they carry that show, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if they're planning on doing a second season. I hope so. I hope they do a second season. They leave it very much open for the potential for a second season at the end of the first season, if you haven't seen it. And so, like I said, it's out there. It's really good. I know a lot of people have checked out on Marvel, and if you're one of those people, that's fine. I get it. But I've really been encouraged by some of the things that we've gotten from Marvel here recently. Obviously, the Captain America film last year was not really good, but they followed it up with Thunderbolts, which was a really solid entry, one of my favorites. And then they had Fantastic Four, which was literally, as currently is like my number 3, number 4 MCU most favorite MCU film of all time. I love that. I thought they just nailed a lot of what makes the Fantastic Four a compelling comic book group of heroes. And then they followed up with this show of Wonder Man, which was really good. I don't know what their plans are for this character. I don't know if they plan to fold him into the actual movies, bring him into any of those types of things. I have no idea. At this point, I really don't care. They did a really good job of bringing Wonder Man to the screen with, like I said, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who has done pretty decent amount of work in the superhero universe. He was on Watchmen, he was in Aquaman, both Aquaman films, and he was in this now for the MCU side of things doing Wonder Man. Like I said, he's been really good. This suits him, and he brings a lot of gravitas to this. If you've never seen him act before, he's a really strong actor. I feel like he's going to have bigger things come his way in terms of like awards and prestige and things like that. I think that's just time eventually going to get there, and he'll get a role that's perfect for him to, win an Oscar, or win an Emmy, or whatever it may be. But really good stuff. I really enjoyed this. If you haven't seen it, like I said, it's a standalone. There's very little that you have to know. You might need to know about Ben Kingsley's character and why they call him the Mandarin and that type of stuff. But other than that, you don't have to know a whole lot about this show coming into Damage. You don't really need to know what that is coming into this. I mean, you can figure it out pretty easily based off of what they have in the show. It's got Stewie from Succession, who was fantastic. Like I said, really good stuff. Check it out if you haven't. And if like I said, if you've been out on Marvel, that's fine. But you might want to give them another chance here with Wonder Man. All right, last thing, and then I've got to start my actual job. Over the weekend, this past weekend, we learned that Brandon Sanderson, who has written tons of novels, his Cosmere universe is going to make its way to Apple Television and films. I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be great. If you haven't read Brandon Sanderson stuff, I would really recommend it. I've listened to a lot of audiobooks of his. I've listened to all 5 of the main Stormlight novels. I've listened to all of the main Mistborn novels, both eras, both era 1 and 2, and I've read some, and I've listened to a few of the Reckoner series books. He's a great writer. He's really good at what he does. He's had his books and his property sold, the rights to them sold before, and they just never got out of production. I'll be very interested to see what happens this time around, because he has basically he negotiated a deal with Apple, and he has, for the most part, full creative control. He's going to be a producer, and he's going to be a writer, and that excited a lot of Sanderson fans. And it excites me too, because it does mean that he'll get his vision. He'll be able to ensure that his vision for what he wants these things to be will be pretty accurate when it makes its way to the screen. But my only concern with that is I'm just afraid that with him being given full creative control, if this thing won't actually make it to screen, because while he has full creative control, he and the studios have to agree to who will be cast, how this will be presented, how close to the original manuscript are we actually going to stay here. And that's the part that concerns me a little bit, because I'm just afraid that, especially with Stormlight, and this is the one that really concerns me. With Stormlight, I'm afraid he's going to be really like, I've got to hold to the ethnicities that I've described and that I've put into my novels. Because if you get on any of these fan sites, one of the first things they'll tell you, if you start seeing anybody do a fan casting, and it's somebody who's a white person or something like that, the first thing you will see is, that's not an Asian with an epicanthic fold. That's the first thing that you have blowback. And I do wonder how much that's going to matter to Brandon Sanderson, because if he puts a cast, look, I'm all for multi ethnicities. I would love for them to get as many ethnicities as they possibly can into this show. But if you're going to be beholden to that, I don't know that Apple is going to want to go down that road, because let's just be honest, there's not enough Asian actors that Americans are familiar with, to draw in people outside of the readers. And that's what Apple is banking on, that this show based on these stories will be so compelling and will be so good that other people outside of the readers will want to come and watch it. And I don't know that if you try to stay as close to that ethnicity that he has set up his characters in, because like I said, they live on a different world, but the way he has described them basically is they are Asian with epicanthic folds. I don't even know what an epicanthic fold is, but you ask any Brandon Sanderson fan, they'll tell you that's what the people of Roshar are supposed to be. So that is a concern of mine. I do wonder if this will ever actually make it to television or movie screens. Mistborn is less so. I think I have a little more confidence in the Mistborn saga making its way to movie screens because that's probably a lot easier to pull off. Stormlight's going to be tough. Stormlight's going to be really, really tough. There are huge monsters. There's this very complex magic system. There are these flying armies. It's a really, really difficult story to pull off, and I'll be very interested to see if that actually ends up making its way to television. That's going to be like that. That's going to be a hard one to pull. Mistborn's a little more straightforward, and they can do it. The only issue with Mistborn is how can you make the magic system in Mistborn? How can you make it easy to understand without having coming in and read it? That's the one thing that I will be that how mass how big of a mass appeal does Mistborn have in terms because when you start trying to when he starts trying to explain that magic system, it can be a lot and it's a lot to figure out. But I have faith they can do it. I'm hoping that they do because, like I said, those are really really good novels. Uh, and look, they're all tied together, and that's going to be another issue with this is because it's all part of the Cosmere. It's like the MCU. Like Mistborn is one part of the Cosmere. You got Stormlight is another part of the Cosmere, and he may do some other stuff that's on a different planet. It's a pretty complex universe, and I just wonder if people are still going to be there for that outside of the book readers. I think the book readers will go to this in droves if it ever makes its way actually to screens. I just do worry about the people outside of the books. So. All right, guys, let me wrap it up and get started with my actual job. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, I hope that you have a great week. And until next time, we will see you then.